What's the most fucked up thing you've seen at work? I worked at one of the busiest Walmarts in the country during spring break for 6 years. I wouldn't even know where to begin. I guess the drunk lady leaving the bathroom with her pants around her ankles while actively shitting as she walked across the front of the building and back outside into the wild. None of the workers wanted to deal with it, so they parked a shopping cart over each turd until the cleaning crew came in. I saw a co-worker get crushed to death under 6 tons of dirt. I helped dig his body out. Worked at a call center. I was in the break area on the 2nd floor and heard a guy getting into an argument with his soon-to-be ex-wife. I walked away and back into my call area, and about 30 seconds later the whole call center went into lockdown. Found out that the guy decided to kill himself and jump headfirst into the concrete floor and landed right in front of my coworker. He was granted unlimited paid days off and paid therapy for the rest of the year. Once saw someone step into a bucket of hot fryer oil. It got into their shoes and everything. Was so bad that when they took the shoe off it peeled off skin with it. The person had 2nd and I believe 3rd degree burns. He never came back, but I saw the pictures and it was horrific. Guy cut his finger in the deli slicer and tried to keep cutting lunch meat for a customer with blood everywhere. Saw a guy fall 40 floors onto a large pile of cast iron piping as I was walking off for lunch. Didn't end up eating lunch after that. Coworker ended up ODing and no one in his family told his dad. The only reason his dad found out his son died was because the dad called the company to see if his son still worked there. My boss had to be the one to tell him the bad news because no one in the guy's family was willing to tell him. I used to work with special needs kids ages 3-7, and one of them came up to me on a Monday morning and told me her dad died over the weekend, then skipped off to go play with the rest of the group. I learned later that day that he had overdosed on heroin, and I'm assuming she hadn't fully understood what being dead meant, and that she thought she might see him again. Opioid addiction patient would inject directly into open wounds in her biceps. And I'm not talking small wounds. Both her biceps were eaten away. There were little thready bits of tissue that were inconvenient because they would get caught on stuff, so she cut them. She was in her mid-20s but had started using as a teenager with her mom. She would get bloodstream infections and heart infections and leave before finishing treatment. It's November right before Christmas 2011 and CEO told me CTO to fire a guy so we could make our bonuses for the year. I replied, his wife is dying of cancer and has 2 months at most to live and he has kids. Just fire me and you'll make your bonus. Without so much as a blink he said, well, what would you do? I said, I can defer some equipment purchases to the next year and that will cover the $30,000 you are looking for. He said, great, do that. He literally didn't care about another human being who was at the lowest of their lows. I'll never forget that, and fuck you, Rich. Airline pilot. Watched a guy die in the Nashville terminal once. Gate C10. He keeled over in his chair waiting for boarding. EMS was there almost immediately. They did CPR on him for a good 15 minutes, way past when everyone knew he'd passed. The part that's haunting was watching it click for his wife that he was gone. Her reaction. I'll never forget that. A guy knew he was getting fired, so he took a shit in the trash can in his cubicle. Nobody knew if he did it there or took it into the bathroom to shit in it, but he did it one way or another. He got called up to HR and was let go. Then the people working in his area started complaining about the shit smell and, sure enough, I found it in his little trash can. Then I called him to ask about it and he said it was an old burrito he forgot to throw out. It was not an old burrito he forgot to throw out. A guy losing a finger because he tried moving an industrial strength fan without turning it off first and his finger slipped through the grate. I'm a nurse. Used to work on an oncology unit. One of my patient's family members walked into the wrong room by accident. The patient in that room had passed away and was shrouded, waiting for transport to the morgue. She threw herself on the body, weeping, thinking it was her loved one and no one had called her. Then we realized what happened. It was not good. 2 things. Pulled up to work. Dude runs out of the store and is immediately shot by a dude behind me. He was stealing and the other guy just shot him. I called out that day. I was the only guy on the front end and a dude had went into the bathroom like 50 minutes ago. So they sent me to check, found him slumped over dead. He OD'd and died in our fucking bathroom. I went home after that. The most fucked up thing I saw was my boss being stabbed by his wife. Guy get crushed and killed by machinery he was working on while on a scissor lift. Also saw some guys test the fire system by piling a bunch of trash on the floor of a loading area, dousing it with lighter fluid and igniting it. Turns out it worked. I saw someone who had fallen into an industrial shredder and unfortunately went through. Saw one guy drop dead off his job. One get an arm cut off pulp mill. One get a gloved paper mill. But the winner was the day we walked into work at an auto parts store and found the assistant manager fucking another assistant manager in the ass. Just going at it. Once witnessed a group of 15-16-year-old teenagers steal an older man's wallet in the mall. They ran past the coffee shop I worked in and went up the escalator closely followed by the man. Next thing I knew I heard screaming and fighting and smelled metal which turned out to be a shit ton of blood. Turns out, the man got into a fight with them and then got stabbed. That entire half of the mall got shut down by the police and the smell lingered for the rest of that day. I worked in an assembly line, making skyjacks. A female coworker was cleaning a base with her hand on a tire. Another worker was testing the tires, and when she tested the tire that the girl was resting her hand on, it forced her arm into a 1-inch gap in the base. I couldn't even squeeze my pinky in this gap. She was stuck in this machine for about 45 minutes, arm completely shattered. Everyone was in a panic trying to get her arm out, but they literally had to disassemble the whole thing. The screams still haunt me. No one allowed in stairway, except during shift change. I caught them fucking in the stairway. A guy cut his forearm open with a paint chip from the wall and then played with his tendons like they were guitar strings. Meanwhile blood was spraying all over the cell. I'm a corrections officer. I was a head lifeguard instructor. The worst was probably a 15-year-old boy that dove of the diving board, cracked his head open on the bottom of the pool blood gushing, and was unconscious. My coworker and I had to do a deep water spinal rescue which is basically the hardest rescue at a pool. The kid not only survived, but became a fellow lifeguard himself the next summer. I was a cashier at McDonald's for a few months in HS. One night when I was working, 2 guys got into a fight in the parking lot and one dude pulled out a gun and shot the other dude. He lived. Had a homeless woman vomit up blood and parts of her stomach lining all over me before dropping dead. Used to work at a regional coffee shop in the Midwest, I won't say which, and it's definitely not Scooter's Coffee on 929 Walnut Saint in Kansas City, Missouri. Anyway, we had been seeing a few cockroaches around and management called in exterminators. On a hunch something to do with cockroaches' innate love for heat, guy lifts open the espresso machine and finds not 1, not 2, not th a whole ass colony of cockroaches ecosysteming it up right in the machinery. That was 2 years into my college job as a barista there and I had a latte every day. Drug addicts basically lined up outside the Circle K next door smoking shooting up. This is why, even if you buy something you can't use the bathroom. I'm not cleaning up after them. Doing retail and this woman tried to rope all of us working at the counter into shaming her son husband. Because he came up and asked about our store hours. This went on for 10 minutes and we're basically begging her to go away and the guy looks like a whip dog. So uncomfortable and gross. Mild compared to most, but saw a kid's laptop explode in the middle of the library. Battery completely melted down and destroyed the